Today we're going to be talking about conditional statements for our 2.2 notes. So if you have some map colors or highlighters, it might be a good idea to use those as you're taking notes, or if you're on your iPad, to use different colors. So I am going to use pink for my P, which, remember, P is your hypothesis, and that's the stuff that comes after the word if. And you guys should be referring to your vocabulary grid, which is due Monday, so don't forget to do it, for the definition of that. And I'm going to be using blue for Q, and remember your conclusion is Q, and that is what comes after the word then. So you need to review what a conditional statement is, hypothesis, and conclusion using your vocabulary grid. If you phrase your conjecture using the if-then format, you can easily pick out the hypothesis and conclusion. Because remember, your hypothesis is what comes after the word if, and your conclusion is what comes after the word then. So if look at this example. It says, if a butterfly has a curved black line in its hind wing, then it is a viceroy. So my hypothesis is everything after the word if. So a butterfly has a curved black line in its hind wing would be my hypothesis. Now my conclusion is going to be it is a viceroy. So if it's written in the if-then format, it makes it easy. So go ahead and pause this video and see if you can do example 1B. So if you look at example B, if today is Thanksgiving Day, then today is Thursday. Your hypothesis is everything that comes after the word if, so today is Thanksgiving Day, and your conclusion is everything that comes after the word then. Today is Thursday. So not all of your conjectures are going to be written in the if-then format. So if it's not, like this one, a number is an integer if it is a natural number, go ahead and rephrase that into your if-then statement to make it easier to find your hypothesis and conclusion. So we have the if, it's right there. It says if it is a natural number. So if a number is a natural number, then it is an integer. Now you can easily use that if-then to find your hypothesis and conclusion. So your hypothesis would be a number is a natural number, and your conclusion would be it is an integer. When we were talking about the law of syllogism, you guys were using that if-then format. So now we're just going to have some extra practice on writing a conditional statement for each of these sentences. So if you look at the first one, it says that tarantulas are a type of spider. So if I was rephrasing that into an if-then, we would say that if an animal is a tarantula, then it is a type of spider. You guys were not seeming to have any issues with this in class, and we talked briefly about it in the 2.1, 2.3 video. So why don't you go ahead and pause and see if you can do example B. So when you're writing your if-then statement, what you should be doing is you're identifying your hypothesis and your conclusion, just like we did in the last slide. So here, you know that the midpoint M of a segment, that's your hypothesis. And then your conclusion is that M would bisect the segment. So that will help you write your if-then statement. So if M is the midpoint of a segment, then it bisects the segment. A conditional statement has a truth value of either true or false. It is false only when the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. So that is a really important statement that you guys need to pay attention to. So it is false only when the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. So a conditional statement is false only when P is true and Q is false. Okay? So this next part is kind of what we need to talk about. So if the hypothesis is false, the truth value will always be true. So I have an example here to kind of help you remember this, and just bear with me. So if I get paid, I will take you to the movie. So P is getting paid, and Q is that they'll take you to the movie. So if I don't get paid and I don't take you to the movie, then I haven't broken my promise. Okay? So it's true here. So if I don't get paid and I don't take you to the movie, then I haven't broken my promise. So that conditional statement would still be true. If I don't get paid, but I still take you to the movie, then the statement was still true because you didn't break your promise. So the only way it is false is if you get paid, so that's your P is true, but I didn't take you to the movie, so that was your Q is false. So you need to try to remember that if the hypothesis is false, and the truth value will always be true. To show a conditional statement is false, you need to find one counterexample where the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. So let's look at example 3. So we're trying to determine if the statement is true or false. And if it's false, then we have to give that counterexample. So my conditional statement is if you live in El Paso, then you live in Texas. So if the hypothesis, which that's your P, you live in El Paso, is true, then the conclusion, which is Q, you live in Texas, is also true. So on this one, the conditional statement would then be true because P was true and Q was true. So let's look at this second example. So if this month is September, the next month is December. So my hypothesis, which is this month is September, is true, and my conclusion, the next month is December, is actually false. So in order to prove that the conditional statement is going to be false, I'm going to need to provide a counterexample. So in this one, if this month is September, which is a true statement, the next month would be October, which would be also true. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do example C. In this example, if an angle is obtuse, then it has a measure of 100 degrees. My hypothesis, which is P, an angle is obtuse, was true, so P was true, and the conclusion, which represents Q, has a measure of 100 degrees, is false. My conditional statement is false because I can have a counterexample. I can draw an angle that is obtuse whose measure is not 100 degrees. So I drew an angle, marked its measure as 150 degrees for my counterexample. So let's look at this example. If an odd number is divisible by 2, then 2 plus 4 equals 11. Alright, so my hypothesis, which in this case is an odd number is divisible by 2. So right off the bat, you should notice that there's an issue because that is false. Now remember what we talked about with the if I get paid, then I will take you to the movies. So we said that if the hypothesis is false, then the conditional statement is actually true. Now, this might be hard for you to understand, but the key here is that you have to remember that the conditional statement can only be false if the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. So this is what I highlighted earlier. So here, when I saw that right off the bat that my hypothesis was false, it doesn't even matter what comes after then, because I know my conditional statement has to be true. You need to review your vocab grid for the definition of converse, inverse, and contrapositive. I have a few notes over here in the margin that I'll be referring to as we do this example. So we are going to write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the conditional statement. So my given statement is if an insect is a butterfly, then it has 4 wings. So my hypothesis, P, is everything that comes after the word if. So an insect is a butterfly would be my P, or my hypothesis. And remember, my conclusion, which represents Q, is everything that comes after the word then. So it has 4 wings. So now I'm going to write the converse. So remember, to write your converse, all you have to do is swap P and Q. So now what I'm going to write is that if an insect has 4 wings, then it is a butterfly. So all I did right here was I took Q, it has 4 wings, and I put that first. So if an insect has 4 wings, then, so now P, it is a butterfly. So now I have my converse. Now I need to determine if that is true or false. So remember, if it is false, then you can come up with a counterexample. So a moth is an insect with 4 wings. So that means that my converse must be false. Now to write your inverse, you're going to add the word not. So I'm going back to my original P and Q to write my inverse. So if an insect is not a butterfly, then it does not have 4 wings. So we're trying to determine if our inverse is true or false. So if an insect is not a butterfly, then it does not have 4 wings. Well, can you come up with a counterexample? And I'm not just coming up with this information from memory. If you're looking at the photos on page 83 in your textbook, there's a picture of a moth and a butterfly, and you can see that a moth is not a butterfly, but it has 4 wings. So that means that my inverse must also be false. Now, the last one, to write your contrapositive, you're going to swap P and Q, and you're going to use the word not. So for my contrapositive, if an insect does not have 4 wings, then it is not a butterfly. So I'm basically taking my converse and I'm putting the word not into it. So if an insect does not have 4 wings, then it is not a butterfly. So is that a true or false statement? Well, a butterfly must have 4 wings, so we know that that must be true. Now you're going to pause the video and you're going to do the next example. Make sure that you write your hypothesis P, your conclusion Q, and then go ahead and try to find the converse, inverse, and contrapositive and determine whether they are true or false. In this example, the very first thing that I did is I went ahead and I identified my hypothesis, which is P, that's what comes after the word if. My conclusion, which is Q, that's the words that come after the word then. So an animal is a cat, it has 4 paws. To find the converse, all I did was switch P and Q. So I have an animal has 4 paws, then it is a cat, which is a false statement. And you can use a counterexample of that a dog is not a cat, but it has 4 paws. My inverse statement, remember on that one, you basically go back to your original, so the order is still PQ, but you use the word not. If an animal is not a cat, then it does not have 4 paws, is also false. My contrapositive, so on this one, P and Q are switched, and we include the word not. So if an animal does not have 4 paws, then it is not a cat is actually true. You need to make sure that you guys write your summary for these notes. If you need to go back and rewatch the video to clarify any of the content or just to help you make sure that you really understood it prior to writing your summary, that would be a good idea. You can also look in your textbook under Chapter 2, Section 2 if you need a little extra practice or any clarification. We will be discussing this in class, so make sure that you used your notes in your margin to identify anything that you wanted to ask.